Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. In this video I want to show you how to make this fun little folio in the size 6 by 6 inches. And it's a very interactive folio, so there's a lot of pockets and a waterfall page as well as a swing feature. So I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. And to decorate this folio, I actually used a paper pad which I got in a local store here in Germany. So I unfortunately don't have any collection name for you so that you could order this collection, but if you live in Europe and you have an Action store nearby, you could find this paper pad there. And before I start with the tutorial for today, I just want to add here that you could also get the coordinating cutting guides in my Etsy store, so you will find the link down below. And these cutting guides not only include all the measurements, but they also include some templates as well as images so that you can really see how to put together this folio. Okay, so now let's just start with the tutorial. So of course the first thing we need to do is cutting down our cardstock as well as our chipboard. And for the album cover we would need 3 chipboard elements A in size 6.5 by 6.5 of an inch. And after cutting my chipboard or cardstock elements, I always like to get a pencil and also label them with the right letters. So these are the letters you would also find in the cutting guide, of course. And then we also need chipboard elements B and C, and for B we need to cut at 6.5 of an inch by 1 1/4 of an inch, and then C is going to be cut at 6.5 of an inch by 1 inch. And then we also need cardstock in the size 8 inches by 12 1/4 of an inch, as well as one cardstock element E in the size 8 inches by 12 1/2 of an inch. After cutting all our cardstock and chipboard elements for the album cover, we of course also need to cut our pattern papers to decorate the album cover with. And here we need pattern paper A, also 3 times, in the size 6 3/8 of an inch by 6 3/8 of an inch. And then we also need our pattern paper B in size 6 3/8 of an inch by 1 1/8 of an inch. And then we also need pattern paper C in size 6 3/8 of an inch by 7/8 of an inch. And after cutting everything down to size, we can continue by attaching our cardstock element D and our cardstock element E to each other. And for this I like to use my 1/2 of an inch tape. It's a very strong tape. And I would probably recommend to use tape, but if you want to use wet adhesive, you could also do that, and then I would recommend to just use a ruler and a pencil and mark it like 1/2 of an inch from the right side of pattern cardstock element D, and then you can go ahead and just attach cardstock element E on top of cardstock element D. And then after I have glued it down, I also get my bone folder to burnish it down. Now for the next step, I really like to use this tool set by Craftelier. So this is an online store here in Europe, and it's really great to make the cover of an album. So I can highly recommend to get a tool set like this. But if you don't have one, you could just use a regular ruler and mark the distance to the edge of the cardstock elements so that you have an even border around the chipboard, which we are going to place next. But I use this L-shaped ruler here, and then I place it on the left side of cardstock element D, and then I get my wet glue and I just place it on the back of chipboard element A. And as you can see, I really place a lot because I want this to hold very well. And then I can just press it against the ruler, and that's why I like to use wet glue here, because you can still move it around, find the right position, and use the ruler as a guide so that you have an even border around the chipboard element. After attaching the first chipboard element A, you would need the second tool, which is this T-shaped ruler. And this is actually 1/4 of an inch wide. So if you are not using this tool set, you would make sure to have the distance between chipboard element A and chipboard element B of 1/4 of an inch. So I use this tool as a space holder between those chipboard elements, but you could also use 1/4 of an inch tape to place between these chipboard elements, or you could just use your ruler and measure it and then just mark it down and have it like as a space in between. So now we can place our chipboard element B, and then we can exchange the tool for this long ruler, and then we can move the T-shaped ruler to the right, and then our next chipboard element to attach would be our chipboard element A again. So again, use some wet glue and then just place it right next to the tool as a space holder. And I just want to add here, because you see me using my ruler and trying to still move around the chipboard elements a little bit because there wasn't an even border. But to be honest, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super even. So even if you're not using this tool set, you can make a perfect cover, because in the end you will cover the inside after wrapping your album cover, so you won't be able to see if there was really an even border around. So after attaching the second chipboard element A, we need to attach chipboard element C, and for this again I like to use this T-shaped tool as a space holder between both chipboard elements, and then I get my wet glue and I attach it to the cardstock as well, and then you can continue by attaching the last chipboard element, which would be another chipboard element A. And once you have attached all the chipboard elements, you can remove the tools, and then you can just go ahead and use a large bone folder to burnish it down. And I also like to turn around the construction and burnish it down on the outside. And now you would need some wider tape, so I'm using the same tape but in the size 3/4 of an inch. And then you just want to place it all around the chipboard element construction, so you just want to place it on the cardstock. And to rip off the tape from the tape roll, I like to use this metal ruler, so this gives me a nice clean edge. And because I noticed that I accidentally used the wrong measurements when I cut down the cardstock, so I used my L-shaped ruler here again, and I just used a pencil to mark it down, and then I cut it off. And after you have attached the tape all around the chipboard construction, I would suggest to again get your bone folder and burnish it down really well. Now for the next step, we would need to cut the corners, and again I really like this tool, which is also part of the tool set, because with this you can just place it on top of the corners of the chipboard, and then you can get your pencil and just mark the corners, and this leaves you with the perfect corners in the end. But if you don't have this tool, that's fine as well. You could just use your scissors and cut at an angle right next to the corners of the chipboard. But as you can see, you need to be careful because also here you want to have this little bit of gap between the chipboard corners and the edge of the cardstock. So as you can see, there's also, I would say, maybe also a 1/4 of an inch of space in between. And what I like to do then is I like to pre-fold my cardstock. So as you can see, I just use my thumbs and I just fold up the cardstock on all 4 sides, and then I get my large bone folder again and I just burnish it down around the edges of the chipboard so that there's an even edge and it's pre-folded, so it's easier to stick down in the next step. And then you can continue by removing the tape from the first side, and I like to start with the longer sides. So I remove the tape from the bottom side here, and then I use my thumbs and fingers again to fold it up and stick it down. And I like to start in the middle, and then I use my large bone folder to burnish it down to the sides. And then I continue with the opposite side, so I like to do the other long side next. And again, start in the middle and burnish it down to the right and the left. And then you want to turn around your construction and also remove the tape from the shorter side. But here you need to be careful, and that's why I zoomed in, because before you stick it down, you want to tuck in the corners a little, and for this I like to use my bone folder again, and you see me just tucking in the corners just a little bit and stick it to the tape, and then you can go ahead and wrap your album cover on these sides as well. And to be able to close up the album cover, I get my large bone folder again and I just burnish in between those chipboard elements so that you would be able to close it up easily. And now we have finished the basic construction for the album cover, and we can continue by adding our pattern paper to the album cover as well. And for this I like to use wet glue instead of tape, because then you can still move around the pattern paper. And I just chose what I wanted to be on the front, so you see me adding this beautiful pattern paper here to the front cover. And then I also use my bone folder to burnish it down, and then I turn around my album cover and I use this pink pattern paper to add on the back side. And then you can also add pattern papers B and C to the spine of your album. And again, make sure that you use enough glue and then burnish it down as well. For the next step, which is adding our ribbon closure, you need to open up your album cover, and then you want to find the middle on the very left side. So get a ruler and just measure to find the middle and mark it down with a pencil. So this would be the place where we want to place the eyelet on the front cover, and then we also need to find the middle for the back cover, and this would be on the second chipboard element to the right side. So again, find the middle, mark it down. And then to attach the eyelets, you would need any kind of eyelet setting tool. And I actually like to use the Big Bite by Real Memory Keepers. And yeah, just punch the holes first, and after punching the holes you can choose your eyelets. And I actually decided that the gold eyelets would work very well with this collection. So I chose some white golden eyelets, and then you just need to place it inside the holes. Get your eyelid setting tool again, make sure that it's in the right settings, and then you can go ahead and set your eyelids. Next, you would need to get the ribbon you want to use for your ribbon closure, and I decided to use this pink white ribbon, and then you just want to place it through the holes from the outside. And then what I like to do is I get a piece of tape and I place it right next to the eyelid on the inside, and then I can stick down my ribbon onto the tape. And then to fully secure it in place, I like to get another piece of ribbon and place it on top of the eyelid, so that the eyelid would be covered, because it can be very sharp, and also the ribbon is secured in place. And after adding the ribbon to the front cover, we of course also need to add a second piece to the back cover. And for this, I first cut down my ribbon because I hadn't cut it yet. And then I again use the other end of the second ribbon piece and place it through the eyelid from the outside to the inside. And then I again get a piece of tape and stick it to the tape, and then I also cover the eyelid and the ribbon with another piece of tape. And what I also like to do is I get a lighter and then I just burn the ends of the ribbon so that they won't rip apart. And by that you have already finished your album cover, so now we can continue with the inside of the folio. But of course you can also decorate your album cover further, or you leave it just as it is. And for the inside of the folio, we again start by cutting down our cardstock and pattern paper. And the first cardstock elements we would need to cut are cardstock elements A in size 4 7/8 of an inch by 4 3/8 of an inch. And here we need 2 of those. And then we also need 2 of cardstock element B in size 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. And cardstock element C needs to be cut at 4 1/4 by 5 1/4, and cardstock element C we only need to cut once. And then we also need 4 of cardstock elements D in size 4 3/4 of an inch by 6 1/4 of an inch. And we also need to cut cardstock elements E in size 6 1/4 by 6 1/4, and for cardstock element E we need 3 of those. And then we also need 8 pieces of cardstock elements F, and cardstock element F needs to be cut in size 6 1/4 of an inch by 6 3/4 of an inch. And because we need a lot of different cardstock elements to build our folio inside, I would suggest that you do the same as for the album cover and go ahead and label all of these cardstock elements with the coordinating letter. And then we also need 2 of cardstock element G in size 7 1/4 of an inch by 3 5/8 of an inch. And the last cardstock elements we need to cut are cardstock elements H and I in size 6 1/4 of an inch by 3 inches, and here we only need 1 each. Now, after cutting all our cardstock elements, we of course also need to cut our pattern paper to later cover our cardstock with. So the first pattern paper pieces we need to cut are pattern papers A in size 3 by 4 inches, and of course, as we have also cut 2 cardstock elements A, we need 2 pattern papers A as well. And then we also need 1 pattern paper C in size 4 by 5 inches. And next we need 5 of pattern papers D in size 4 by 6 inches. And we also need 2 pieces of pattern papers E in size 4 by 6 inches as well. And then we also need to cut pattern papers F in size 6 by 6 inches. And for pattern paper F, we actually need 18 of those. And we also need 2 of pattern papers G in the size 2 7/8 of an inch by 6 inches. And then we only need 1 of pattern paper H in size 6 1/4 by 1 1/8 of an inch, as well as 1 pattern paper I in the size 6 1/4 by 7/8 of an inch. And then we can continue with the next step, which is scoring our cardstock elements. And the first cardstock elements we need to score are cardstock elements A, and here we need to score on the longer side at 1/2 of an inch, and then on the shorter inch side, the 4 3/8 of an inch side, we need to score at 1/2 of an inch again, but also at 3 7/8 of an inch. And then for cardstock elements B and C, there is no scoring required, so you can just lay them aside and you can continue with scoring cardstock elements D. And all cardstock elements D need to be scored at 1/2 of an inch on the shortest side, so on the 4 3/4 of an inch side. And we also don't need to score on the cardstock elements E, so we can continue with cardstock elements F. And for cardstock elements F, we need to score the cardstock at 1/2 of an inch on the 6 3/4 of an inch side. And especially with cardstock elements F, I just want to say that you have to be careful that you score on the right side, because it looks like square format, but there is a longer and a shorter side, and you want to make sure that you score on the longer side. And then we also need to score cardstock elements G, and here we need to score on the longer side, so on the 7 1/4 of an inch side. We need to score at 1/2 of an inch as well as at 6 3/4 of an inch, and then on the 3 5/8 of an inch side, we only need to score at 1/2 of an inch. And then again for cardstock element H and I, there is no scoring required, so we can go on with the next step. And the next step would be to add our tape to our cardstock elements. So now we only need all the cardstock elements we did our scoring at, and then I like to use my 3/8 of an inch tape, and you just want to place it right next to all the scoring lines you just did. So yeah. Just every cardstock with a scoring line needs to be taped, so place it right next to the scoring line and make sure that you don't accidentally cover the scoring lines. And then we need to cut off the corners, and for this I like to turn around my cardstock so that I can properly see the scoring lines. And then I get my small scissors and I just cut at an angle right next to all those scoring lines. So again, make sure that you not accidentally cut into the scoring lines, but just right next to them. And you can do that for all cardstock elements except for cardstock elements D. So for cardstock elements D, you don't want to cut the corners at an angle, but just cut off the tape excess hanging from the edges. So again, turn around your cardstock, get your small scissors and just cut off the tape excess, but don't cut the corners, so don't cut the cardstock at all. And now that we have prepared all our cardstock elements, we can start by building our first interactive page style. And this needs actually to be placed on the inside, so that's the first page you would see when you open up your album. And here we didn't attach our pattern paper A to the chipboard element A yet, so we want to do that now. But first you want to cover your cardstock element C with pattern paper C. And then you can just get your eyelet setting tool again, and then you want to make sure that you place your cardstock element C in the middle of pattern paper A. And when you have it in the right position, hold it together, get your eyelet setting tool and punch a hole in the top right corner of cardstock element C. And then again you would need an eyelet, so I chose a small eyelet this time, but also a golden one. And just place the eyelet in the hole and set your eyelet with the eyelet setting tool, and this way you have created a fun swing feature. So now you will be able to move cardstock element C to the top or the bottom, and then you can place the first photo just behind it. And because the eyelet backing is very sharp, you see me using a piece of tape again to cover the eyelet backing, and then I just use some red glue to attach the pattern paper A with the swing feature onto our chipboard element A. And then we need to open up the album cover completely, and we need our cardstock elements H and I. And those cardstock elements need to be placed on the chipboard elements B and C. So for this, I like to cover the back of the cardstock elements completely in tape. So I use my 2-inch wide tape as well as my 1-inch wide tape to cover it completely. And then I just remove the tape backing completely from the back side, and then I hold it above the chipboard element B and the chipboard element C to find the right position, and then I just eyeball it actually. And then once I have it in the right position, I just go ahead and press it down. And then after attaching cardstock elements H and I get my large bone folder again, and I just burnish while holding my chipboard cover against the bone folder to get back those scoring lines right next to the spine of the album. And then we can prepare our waterfall page, and for this we need cardstock element E as well as all our cardstock elements D. And first I like to turn around the cardstock elements D and get my bone folder to fold up the little flaps we created. So you don't want to fold up the flaps on the side where you placed the tape at. So turn it around and then fold it on the back side. And then you can start to attach your cardstock elements D onto cardstock element E, and for this I like to remove the tape backing just from one side, and then I hold up the sticky side and use the non-sticky side to align it to the edge of cardstock element E so that it's in a perfect position. And once I found that position, I go ahead and remove the rest of the tape backing completely and press it down. And then once you have attached the first cardstock element D, you can go ahead and open it up and then attach the next cardstock element D. Just the same, just remove the tape backing from one side, hold up the sticky side, and then place it right next to cardstock element D. So you don't want to place it on top of this little flap, but just right next to it. And then when you have attached the second cardstock element D, of course you would go ahead and open it up again and then attach the next cardstock element D as well. Once you have everything attached, I would again suggest you to get your bone folder and burnish it down, and then we can continue by adding our ribbon closure to this waterfall page. And for this, first again, you want to make sure that you find the middle on the cardstock element D, which is the first page on the top, and then just mark it down by using a pencil. Turn around your waterfall page and also find the middle on the bottom side of the back. And then we need a piece of tape, so I just ripped off a piece and I just place it right on top of the pencil mark. And then we need to get our ribbon and just attach the end of the ribbon onto this tape. And then to secure the ribbon in place, I again like to get another piece of tape to place on top of the ribbon, and we can also use this piece to later attach the waterfall construction to the album cover. So now you want a second piece of ribbon for the front page, so the top page I should say. And here again, just get a piece of tape and attach the end of the ribbon on top of the tape, and then secure it in place by adding another piece of tape on the top. And then again, I like to get my lighter to burn the ends of the ribbon so that they won't rip apart. And then we can go ahead and attach the waterfall construction to our album. And for this, I like to get my 3/8 of an inch tape and I just place it on the back of the waterfall construction, just on the edges, and then one strip in the middle. And then you can continue by burnishing it down and remove the tape backing completely. So then you can open up your album cover and you want to place your waterfall page in the middle, so that's supposed to be the middle page. And for attaching it, I like to remove the whole tape backing, but then I just hold it above the album so that I can make sure that it's in the right position and I don't accidentally cover the scoring lines right next to chipboard element A and B and C. So you don't want to cover this because then you won't be able to close up your album. So you want to place it right in between, right on top of chipboard element A. And now to prepare the booklets, we would need our cardstock elements F. And then first thing, you just get your bone folder and then you fold up all these little flaps we created and burnish them down. And then we have to stack up the cardstock elements F on top of each other, but only 2 each, so you don't want to glue more than 2 together. So again, I just remove the tape backing from one side, then I hold up the sticky side and I use the non-sticky side to align the edges of the cardstock so that there is an even edge. They're perfectly stacked on top of each other, and once I've found the right position, I just go ahead, remove the tape backing, and then I burnish it down. And you want to do that for all 8 cardstock elements F, so remember, always stack 2 on top of each other, so in the end you have 4 like cardstock constructions. And after preparing these elements, you want to just like slide them into each other. So as you can see, open them up, and then you want to have one from the left, one from the right, one from the left, one from the right. So that's how you want to prepare them. And then just make sure that they're perfectly aligned again. So I like to just tap them on my table and then just hold them in place, so you don't want them to move around now. And then I go ahead and I just remove the tape backing on both sides. And then you can get your album cover and just hold it above the album cover so that you can make sure that it's in the right position. Again, you don't want to cover any like scoring line on the album cover on which you would fold the album cover, of course, so make sure that it's attached to the left side of your album cover. And then of course we do exactly the same for the right side, so we prepare our booklet and then we just attach it to the album cover. So now you can continue by decorating your waterfall page, and this step is definitely optional. So as you can see, I just got my corner punch here because I wanted to decorate the corners a little bit, but you could of course just leave the corners as they are. So I just used my corner punch on the cardstock elements as well as on the pattern papers. And then we can continue by attaching our pattern papers to the cardstock elements of the waterfall. And for this, again, I like to use wet glue instead of tape, and I also make sure that there is a nice even border around the pattern paper, so the border of cardstock, which you can see on the bottom of the pages, because that's what you would see when the waterfall is closed. And then we can continue by finishing our booklets on the left and the right side. And I actually forgot to film that you also have to attach cardstock elements E. So for this, you would just open up the booklet after attaching them to the album cover, and then just get some wet glue and place cardstock element E in the middle, so right on top of the chipboard element, which you would still be able to see. And now we need our cardstock elements G, so these are going to be the pockets. And I also like to use a notch punch to just punch a little notch in the middle of the pocket, but this again is of course optional, so you could just attach your pattern paper to the pocket and leave it as it is. But if you want to use a notch punch, first you want to make sure that you place it in the middle. So for this, I again like to use my Tim Holtz ruler, and I just find the middle on both of those pockets. So I turn it around and then I get my pencil and mark it down. And after marking it down, you want to make sure that you have your pattern paper and your cardstock element G, and you actually place your pattern paper on top of cardstock element G, but you don't place it so that you have the border around it, but you just slide it all the way to the top of your pocket. So as you can see, you really want it on the top, so you want to slide it in completely into the notch punch. Make sure that there is this border you want to have on the left and the right side. Hold it in place so that it doesn't move around, and then I like to turn it around. Just make sure that I have the middle, and then I punch it down, and then you can move the pattern paper a little bit to the bottom, and as you can see, this leaves you with a perfectly edge around your pattern paper. And after punching the notches on both of those pockets, you could go ahead and use some wet glue to attach the pattern paper to your cardstock elements G. And now we can attach our pockets to the cardstock element E. So for this, I like to attach the bottom flap of the pockets first. So I just remove the tape from one side on the bottom flap, and then again I use my non-sticky side to align it. And you really want to make sure that you don't accidentally cover the flaps, so not the flaps but the scoring lines on the left and the right side, because you still want to be able to close up the booklet, of course. So I take my time to attach the pocket. and it just makes sure that I'm still able to close the booklet before I place it down. And then once I have found the right position, I just go ahead and remove the tape backing from the sides, and then I stick it down. And then of course you can go ahead and just do exactly the same for the other pocket, so the pocket you want to place on the right side of your album. And now we can continue with matting our pages for the booklets, and for this I like to have both booklets completely open, and then I start with the pattern paper on the pocket page. And here we need a pattern paper E, and you just want to place some glue on the top and on the sides. You don't need a lot of glue, and then you can go on and just slide it into the pockets so that it's behind the notch if you have done a notch, and then just burnish it down. And now we can attach the pattern papers to the pages. So I choose my first pattern paper, so I like to make sure that it matches on the pattern paper I have used for the pocket and the back of the pocket. And then I just go ahead and I place it on the left flap on the right side, and then I like to mirror these sides. So I would now place the same pattern paper on the right flap of the left side. So as you can see, I just want to mirror it, and so I continue. I choose the next pattern paper, and then I like to do it at the same time, so I do the left side as well as the right side. And as you can see, I just use my red glue again to attach these pattern papers to the first 5 pages. But then after attaching the first 5 pattern papers on each side, I like to use some tape to attach the next pattern paper, because this is actually the page which we will later attach our Velcro circle to. So I just get my 3/8 of an inch tape, and I just place it on the side which would be the side to attach the Velcro circle. And then after placing the tape on this side, I just use some red glue to attach my pattern paper, so I can still move it around. And I also like to close up the booklet so that I can see if you would be able to see the pattern paper when the booklet is closed, because I don't like that. I want I don't want to have another border of pattern paper seeing through. So once I have found the right position, I can just move the pattern paper a little bit, and then I can remove the tape backing of the tape which I have attached to the pattern paper, and then I can just burnish it down. And I think this is very helpful for later attaching the Velcro circle, because you don't want to have your pattern paper ripped apart every time or when you open up the booklet. So by using tape, it's just a little bit stronger so that your Velcro circle will stay in place. And of course we would also attach Velcro circles to the other sides each. So again, I like to use tape, but I also like to add a little pull tab by using some ribbon. So as you can see, I just use my ruler here to find the middle, and then I get 2 pieces of the small ribbon, which I have also used for the closing on the waterfall page. And then I also get a little piece of tape, and then I just fold it in the middle and attach it. And this gives me this little ribbon pull tab to attach to the back side of my pattern paper. So just remove the tape backing and place your ribbon pull tabs on top of them. And then you can use your tape to cover the ribbon as well, so that it would hold very well, and you also now have your tape on the side on which the Velcro circles would be placed. And then again, you can go ahead and just use some red glue to attach your pattern papers to the flap. And again, after attaching them by using red glue, you could just move them a little bit so that you would be able to remove the tape backing. And then I like to use my bone folder and burnish it down. And now you can attach the last pattern papers for your cardstock elements F. And for this, again, you just need a wet glue. You don't need tape here because these are not the pages on which you would attach any Velcro circles. And after attaching all the pattern papers, we of course need our Velcro circles. So I just like to use these simple small white ones, but you can get them in many colors and sizes. And then I like to take the, I would say more fluffy side for the top. Actually, so I place it on the left side right next to the pull tab, and then I get the bottom side, which is not so fluffy, to place on top of it. So you actually want to just close the Velcro circles up basically. And then you can go ahead and just close up your booklet page and press it down really hard. And because my Velcro circles are self-adhesive, the other side would just stick to the right page. And then you can just go ahead and do exactly the same for the other side. And then we need our cardstock elements A as well as our pattern papers A. So these are going to be the tag pockets which we want to place on the tops of the booklets. And again, I like to use my notch punch here, but you don't have to use a notch punch, of course. So again, but this time I don't use my ruler to find the middle, because with these small pockets I find it very easy to just eyeball it and have it placed in the middle. So punch the corners by sliding in the cardstock element and the pattern papers at the same time. And after you have punched the notches, not the corners, sorry, you can go ahead and glue your pattern paper to the cardstock elements. And then to attach the pockets, again, I like to attach the bottom of the pockets first. So I remove the tape backing from one side, I align it so I just find the position where I want it to be placed, and then I remove the rest of the tape backing as well as the tape backing on the sides, and then I just use my bone folder to burnish it down. And now for preparing the tags which will go inside of those pockets, I like to use this template, which is also included in the cutting guides and the templates which you could get on Etsy. So I just printed it out at one time, and then I glued it onto a chipboard element, and so I can just use it over and over again to mark the corners and mark the middle for punching the hole. So I find it very easy to use this template. And then just use your crocodile to punch the holes in the middle. And what I like to do now, and again, this is optional, but I think it looks really nice. So I just got a little scrap from the collection, so it's matching the colors. And then I get some tape and I place it on the back side. So you could use 1/2 inch tape, would work best, I think. And then I get my crocodile again to punch some holes in the middle of the tape and just leave a little bit of space in between each hole. And then I get this small circle punch to punch around the smaller holes. So this leaves me with these circles, and because I have used the tape the tape on the back side of the scrap, all those circles are now self-adhesive, so you can just remove the tape backing and then just place it around the holes which you have punched on the cardstock Elements B. And then you would need 2 pieces of ribbon again, and I just like to cut the pieces and fold them in the middle, so then you can pull it through these holes and just pull the ends through the loop you have created by folding them in the middle. So I do this for both tags, of course, and then I like to get my scissors and just cut the ribbon ends a little bit so that they look nice. And then again, you don't want to have these ends rip apart, so I would suggest to use a lighter as well to just burn the ends of the ribbon a little bit. And as you can see, I also continued by decorating the pockets, and for this I just used 2 little journaling cards as well as a scallop frame die cut and my die cutting machine, and then I just attached them to the pockets. And now we are almost done, and the last step would be to attach our pattern papers I as well as pattern paper H to our cardstock elements I and H. So you want to place these strips of pattern paper right in between those pages, so that's actually the insides of the spine of the album. And then again I used a journaling card and a scallop frame as well as a little quote to decorate the waterfall page a little bit more. And I also added some enamel dots in the corners because I think this looks very nice. And yeah, that's it for today's tutorial. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching it and that you could follow me. So as you know, English is not my first language, so sometimes I struggle to explain things. But if you have any questions, you could of course also leave them in the comment box down below. I always like to get your feedback. And then I would also love to get a thumbs up if you liked this video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please leave me a subscription. And then I see you in my next video.